Welcome to Cultivate 21. This seminar is Compensation Basics. My name is Michael Maggiato, Senior Human Capital Advisor with Best Human Capital and Advisory Group. I am happy to present this session, an overview of the basics of the compensation discipline. Though we will cover a lot of ground, this is a very deep discipline, and we just cannot cover every element of compensation in the time allotted. The presentation was originally developed by Cassandra Farrote, owner of Total Reward Solutions, and has been adjusted to fit the allotted time by Michael Maggiato in collaboration with Cassandra. Please feel free to connect with Cassandra Farrote, owner of Total Reward Solutions, or Michael Maggiato at Best Human Capital and Advisory Group as a follow-up to this presentation, and they are happy to provide guidance and assistance. While this is what employees think about how compensation is determined, in reality, this is how it is actually determined. It is part science and part art. The science involves the principles and policies used in compensation development, and the art is how those principles and policies are applied. As with most disciplines of human resources, there are a lot of gray areas. It is not all clear lines and binary decisions. The best HR and compensation professionals are comfortable operating in that gray space. Let's take music as an example. Music is art. There are notes, pitches, terminology, and rhythm. For the best musicians, these elements of music are critical guides, but they do not limit their creativity. Jazz broke all the traditional rules of music from the Renaissance, and yet is among the most popular art forms even today. It gave birth to rock and roll, rap, and can even be felt in modern country music. Like music, the compensation discipline has laws, regulations, and court interpretations that guide HR professionals, but they do not exactly limit them. Like jazz, compensation professionals exert a high degree of creativity to develop compensation strategies that drive talent attraction and retention, while ensuring compliance with existing laws, regulations, and court interpretations. Strategy is at the heart of compensation. Compensation strategy, when aligned with organization's strategic plan, will serve to attract, retain, and motivate employees at all levels of the organization. This chain follows the life cycle of employment, what we are typically focused on at each stage in that life cycle. Beginning with talent attraction, job descriptions help to determine external market value for each position. The selection and staffing plan or processes are developed to help guide new hires' starting offers. Advancing to the talent retention, performance management is used to determine merit increases. Career development, often career pathing and the compensation structure for each role, drives promotion opportunities that are critical for employee retention. And throughout employment, talent motivation is critical. Incentive plans, both direct and indirect financial compensation incentives, motivate employees and drive engagement as well as performance. So too do recognition and rewards. These hold value, and the inclusion of many of these non-monetary rewards aid compensation professionals at increasing overall compensation value without always increasing direct or indirect financial compensation. They help keep the budget in line. A comprehensive pay program includes several elements, and we will touch on each of these. Total rewards is a combination of both compensation and benefits. A total rewards philosophy is important as it guides the development of the individual compensation and benefit philosophies. The total rewards philosophy should be written down and shared with management and employees. Here are some examples. Note the word integrated in the first bullet. Not everyone wants the two, compensation and benefits, to be balanced. Some want more compensation while others want more benefits. In the second bullet, I want to call out the word flexibility. Not everyone wants to allow flexibility. For example, some companies, commonly small companies, find that homogeny is critical to keep costs in line. Other companies, commonly larger companies, feel it is important to differentiate across roles in order to appropriately motivate the larger variety of people, all of whom are motivated differently. There is no one single correct answer. You have to evaluate the decision in the context of your company, your strategic plan, your vision for the future growth of the organization. Context matters. When developing each philosophy, you may decide to lead, lag, or match the market in either benefits, compensation, or a combination of both. Not to get too granular too early, but this can be cascaded down to different roles or families of roles where recruitment may be easier or harder, where retention may be more or less critical to the business. It allows for the flexibility you may feel your business needs in its respective market. Another yardstick against which your philosophy should be measured is your corporate culture. The strategy around total rewards should reflect your culture. If your company culture is highly family focused, ensuring benefits include generous PTO or child daycare policies may be very important. If the organization is a high energy, rapid growth startup, the work hard, play hard culture may offset compensation that lags the market. This may help control costs while driving engagement. Many attending this presentation are business leaders, but not necessarily HR or compensation professionals. As such, I want to make a brief distinction between pay equity and pay parity, so we are all on the same page. More and more, we hear in the news about compensation differences between men and women. Pay equity concerns an employee's perception that compensation received is equal to the value of the work performed. Pay parity concerns the existence of a gap between the pay of employee population groups, and not just between men and women, but across all protected classes and for all employees performing the same essential duties and responsibilities within your company. Parity does not impact the creation of compensation values for given roles, family of roles, or pay bands, but it is about the decision to pay individuals fairly for the work performed. So this part of the presentation will focus on pay equity and the importance of balancing both the internal and external equity. There are several elements used to measure internal and external equity. The first important step is to begin with a job analysis, a formal study of job content with the goal of obtaining all the important and relevant information about a job. Why is it so important to do this? It provides the basis for evaluation of performance, identifies career progression and family groupings, as well as lays the foundation for legal defenses against core issues such as FLSA status, exempt or non-exempt. Methods of accomplishing this include identification and collection of information, such as the nature and level of work, determination of sources of that information, and using the collected information for job documentation and evaluation. Data for ensuring internal and external equity come from many different sources, both primary and secondary. Each is important to a fair and complete job analysis. Among these sources should be a job questionnaire. Developing such a questionnaire with a standard format will ensure collection of the right data about the nature and level of work. Other primary sources should be used as well. Here are some examples of data that likely will be gathered from the various sources. Each provides important insights around the job, the essential duties, and the level of skill required to perform the essential duties. Some of the data will be hard skills, learned abilities acquired and enhanced through patience, repetition, and education. Other data will indicate soft skills, those skills that enable people to navigate their environment, work well with others, perform well, and achieve their goals with complementing hard skills. Soft skills are quite varied and include, but are not limited to, people skills, social skills, communication skills, character or personality traits, and social and emotional intelligence. The next part of ensuring internal equity is the development of job documentation or job descriptions. The official job description should contain the following key elements. One note before we dig into it. There is a difference between the job description that is used for recruitment purposes and posted on a website for advertisement of an opening and the official job description we are talking about here. A job posting may contain some, but should not contain all, of the details from the official job description. Such postings are marketing documents and not a complete recitation of the official job description. Job title. This should be descriptive in nature and likely is different than a title one might use on their business card. It may be a good idea to consider identifying both an internal and an external title. For example, sales representative might be your internal title, while business development manager might be your external title. Your HRIS, if you use a digital system, may limit the length of the title, so be sensitive to such constraints. FLSA status, or Fair Labor Standards Act status. For each position, it is recommended to conduct a duties test periodically and maintain that with the official job description. You may elect to have internal or external counsel sign off on the duties test as well. This will be instrumental to defending the exempt nature of roles should an employee challenge that they are not getting overtime when they feel they should. Organizational unit or department. Hopefully, this is self-explanatory, but could be the Human Resources Department, Sales Department, Accounting, Finance, or others. Reporting relationships. To whom does this role report? And who reports to the role? Note titles and roles, not people's names. The general summary, sometimes called a position overview, or job summary. Try to keep it brief. 2 to 3 sentences is ideal. For some complex jobs, the overview may need to be longer, but brevity is best. Essential duties and responsibilities. This should contain both the required and preferred duties and responsibilities. Not every bullet will be performed every day or even all the time. Job specifications. Think knowledge, skills, and abilities, the minimum qualifications for the position. These may not be the same as the incumbent has who is currently in the role. Working conditions. This could include office or manufacturing environment, physical abilities and requirements such as the ability to lift 50 pounds without assistance, or even the amount and type of travel required for the role. Think of the elements that would be important for the Americans with Disabilities Act accommodation support. Disclaimer statements. Typically, some sort of statement indicating that the job description may not be all-inclusive and is subject to change at the employer's discretion is definitely advised. Approval and dates. Who approved this job description? In some situations, depending upon your process, there may be multiple approvers, and the approval date should be included as well. The third piece of internal equity is job evaluation. It is important to start with an objective similar to these. With the second example, you may consider putting like jobs in similar pay ranges. There are several types of job evaluation programs, both quantitative and non-quantitative. We will briefly walk through each. The non-quantitative evaluation types rely on descriptions rather than numbers or points of some kind. Each compares qualities to the other. The quantitative evaluation type uses some type of numbers or points. As of today, we are aware of only one type of quantitative method used in compensation development and administration. Let's begin with the non-quantitative evaluations. Let's start with ranking. This works well if the organization is small and there are only a few roles in the company. It is the simplest form of job evaluation and relies on the ranking of jobs in order of their overall worth or value to the organization. For example, a janitor is a very important role in the company, maintaining the overall cleanliness of facilities and removing clutter around office spaces that would otherwise distract the creative process of others in operations or slow down the ability to meet or exceed client demands by forcing others to perform their roles. As valuable as a janitor is to a company, most would agree that the vice president of marketing is more valuable, that that role has greater worth to the organization, and so such a role would logically be placed above a janitor when ranking jobs. As with every process, there are advantages and disadvantages. Here are a few related to the ranking of jobs. Next is classification. If you have ever applied for a government job, worked in the military, or hired people from government positions, you may be familiar with job classifications, as this is widely used at both the state and federal levels. It requires that job grades be created with very general and generic definitions for each. Then you compare specific job descriptions to the grade descriptions to determine which job grade is closest in alignment with the job. That is where that job is assigned, and the compensation for that job will be aligned with the compensation range for the grade. This can be time-consuming if there are many different grades and many different roles within a company. It can be easier to control if there are fewer grades. As the labor market adjusts, fewer grades means fewer adjustments, but a better alignment for all jobs in the grade to the market. Slotting requires the use of existing hierarchies established by some other means. Simply compare any new or revised job to those already assigned to the existing grades and slot the job to the level most closely aligned with the duties. Cassandra found that when she went to a large insurance company that had similar structures there before she arrived, it really did not work as well. Slotting is typically better for smaller companies with fewer complexities and numbers of roles. It is the complexity that is found in larger companies that makes this just not a good tool for them. Small to mid-sized companies with lower complexity in job types or job variations will find this much easier to implement. And like everything, there are advantages and disadvantages. Here's a list of several for slotting. Broadbanding is a method used by many large companies. This entails the development of few but very broad pay bands. The spread on some can be so large as to be 80 to 120% of the bottom grade value wide. Each band is characterized by a large group of jobs using the band criteria defined in terms of what the jobs in the band look like. Titling is often generic within the band. As more jobs are assigned to bands and to help employees understand the wide bands, different levels of jobs within bands may become necessary, as well as the need to define a market range for each job within the pay band. Broadbanding is a very common method used by many of the largest companies locally and abroad. As with all methods, there are advantages and disadvantages. One of the greatest challenges is helping employees understand broadbanding. And while it can lead to inequities or be administratively burdensome by adding market ranges and the necessary management of those ranges, it is a really good way to foster movement between jobs, up, down, and laterally, and can consolidate the number of levels or job grades. And the final non-quantitative method is the development of job families. With this method, compensation professionals develop family groupings that could be very broad-based, such as non-exempt, exempt, non-management, management, executive, or very functionally based. How many levels are developed will vary and are determined by the market benchmarking data. Each job family grouping will have a definition developed for it that defines what types of jobs should be grouped in what specific family. Example may be human resources as a job family. All human resources roles across all disciplines of human resources may be slotted here. Seems reasonable, right? But what about hybrid roles, such as HR technology or analytical positions, an HRIS administrator, or even an HR business analyst, for example? Should they be slotted in the HR family, the IT family, or even finance and accounting family? The family definition will determine the appropriate placement and not the job title. Note, this process only impacts compensation design and not reporting structure. In the above example for HR technology or analytical roles, they could be grouped with either IT or finance and accounting from a compensation design standpoint, but the command and control reporting structure may retain them in the HR department. The only quantitative method widely accepted and used is point factor. With this method, select compensable factors. Determine a weighting for each factor based on the importance of your organization. Define factors and degree levels of those factors. Analyze the job to determine the level for each compensable factor. Grab the points associated with the level you pick. Then, add up the points for each job and arrange hierarchically by worth. Eventually, you will want to layer in market data here as well. While this process sounds simple, there are a lot of subjectivity involved. Professional expertise in compensation discipline is highly advised when using point factor. Often, a statistician is used to determine appropriate factor weightings. And yes, there are pros and cons to this method as well. This is definitely one process where the merger of science and art will be crucial. Some roles will not have their points total to a level that would put them in the correct range from a market data standpoint. So those types of roles wind up getting slotted into a higher pay range that aligns with market versus their total points. So now that we have walked through the various job evaluation methods, it's time to plan the selection and implementation of compensation for your jobs. There are 3 overarching key considerations, and we will walk through each. First are organizational issues. Evaluating the impact your compensation plan may have on business environments, the compensation function, management support, and the alignment with organizational culture will all be crucial to the success of a compensation plan. Sometimes, each has their own set of competing priorities and concerns, so there are rarely only one right answer. And that is where the gray area comes into play again for human resources. In the compensation function, of particular note is the technical competence in job analysis, documentation, and evaluation. It is important that your HR compensation professionals possess strong technical competence in the areas mentioned above, or it may be best to engage an outside consultant for support. As a call-out under organizational culture, it is crucial that there be an understanding of what will be openly communicated about the compensation program and to determine if an emphasis will be placed on internal equity in addition to external equity or just external equity. Second, each compensation plan or system you develop will share some common considerations. It will be important to balance both internal and external equity. Remember, internal equity is the company's perceived value of the job relative to the value of the work. Externally, this is the value the marketplace places on your work. The simplicity or complexity to communicate the potential plan will impact employee population perceptions. If they cannot understand it, they likely will be pushback and concern about the program. The technical complexity involves the compensation professional's proficiency to devise, develop, implement, and communicate the plan. Lack of technical expertise can be a big problem unless the plan is more simplistic in design. Timing is important too. The longer the development of the plan takes, the less accurate the data collected and used in the plan design, and the longer it will take to implement. Just remember, speed and quality are often diametrically opposed, but there is a balance in the middle. And finally is the cost. The more expensive the development of the plan, the greater the likely pushback by upper management. Buy-in by management is critical to any initiative, especially compensation plan design. But just because the plan design costs a lot to put together or has recurring costs to the company does not necessarily make the plan better than other options. And third, consider committee, cost, and communication. Using a committee to collaborate and build consensus around various elements described above is a good way to involve others in the process, gain buy-in from management and employees across the organization, and inject transparency into the process. Just be careful about how much time this can consume. While costs are a concern all up and down the process, one element of costs to be aware of is once a plan is decided upon and you are ready to implement it, what will happen to those employees above or below the new pay ranges? It is important to resolve these concerns. And finally, you will need to communicate job evaluation results. There can be pushback on valuations, and having a fair appeals process to re-examine the valuations will further add transparency and gain buy-in regardless of the outcome. Throughout this presentation, we have mentioned external equity and its relationship to market pricing of jobs. Collection of market data is critical in this process, but not all data is equal and not all data is free. In fact, Free data is usually less accurate. There is a reason it is free. While we would all love for fair, free, and accurate information to be readily available all over the internet, just one browser search away and at our fingertips, unfortunately, there is more misinformation and disinformation than accurate and useful information. For these reasons listed on this slide and so many more, too many more to list, it is critical that you focus on obtaining accurate market data at a reasonable cost rather than penny pinching for less accurate data. Also, remember how we said it is important to balance equity both internally and externally, right? We will address this further in just a moment. Let's look at the process of collecting market data. Your compensation philosophy discussed at the beginning will be your guide to defining marketing pricing guidelines. Survey source selection is crucial. Though there are many sources, not all are equal in their quality, content, or validity. Current is preferred to dated data. Guided by your philosophy, consider both industry and geography as well as method of collection. Typically, telephone surveys and recruiting ads or calls are no longer done. After all, with all the robo and marketing calls today, how many of us are really answering our phones anyway as opposed to screening our calls, right? And a big caution about internet data. Do not use sources where data is self-reported. The accuracy and validity of the data is suspect at best. If you are not sure how the data was collected, look at the methodology section of any survey. If they do not divulge the methodology, try to find out. And if you cannot, likely it is self-reported data. Surveys will be based on role descriptions that assuredly will be different from your actual job descriptions. You will have to use your best judgment and select a survey description that most closely aligns with your job's description. Do not match based on titles. These are arbitrary at best. The essential duties and responsibilities should be the measure, not the titles. Next, compile results of all surveys collected and adjust each survey data if necessary to bring it current. This is especially important if the data is dated. The more current the data, the less adjustment will be necessary. If you used an external consultant, they should be using the most up-to-date information. And finally, determine the market composite rate for each job. Remember how I said not all data is equal? It cannot be stressed enough, the need to verify the reputation and integrity of the data source. Verify data screening methodologies used by each source. Ensure that there is appropriate scope measure needed and data is broken out. Ensure that outputs look reasonable. That important janitor role that we talked about earlier, just because a survey calls it sanitation engineer does not mean they command a 6 or 7 figure salary. And it is always best to use no less than 2 surveys to add and increase validity of the data. Even if the one survey source may be a database that purchases other surveys, you will find that data can have swings from one source to another, as all vendor methodologies tend to differ. So, a minimum of 2 surveys is best. And now, with all of that preparation, a lot to do just to get to this point, let's discuss pay structure and design. Pay structure design requires grouping of jobs of equal value and worth into grades with a competitive salary range, and there are 6 easy steps. First, add market data to the job worth hierarchy. Doing this if you use job evaluation method. Look for breakpoints to develop preliminary grades. Third, check job family grade progressions. Note, if you cannot obtain market data, you may not need to do this step. You should be able to fully define the next level and not have it be just a year or 2 more of experience. Fourth, check reporting relationships. Fifth, review for internal or external consistency and reassign some jobs as necessary. And sixth, review and update annually or biannually. Sounds simple, right? Well, There are several additional considerations you'll want to keep in mind. First, the midpoint to midpoint differentials, or the percentage between range and midpoints. For example, if you have an individual contributor in a job family and the next level up would be an entry-level manager, what is the percent increase in salary from the midpoint of the individual contributor pay band to the midpoint of the entry-level manager pay band? For standard compensation structures, this is commonly 10 to 15%, but could be wider. If they are too close together, pay compression becomes a concern. There will be little to no upward mobility in the compensation structure. Upward mobility in compensation is highly desired by employees and can be a big retention tool. Check the range spread. This is the distance from the bottom of the range to the top of the range in a pay band for a position. Today, many are between 40 to 80%. These widths are used to accommodate various levels of experience and performance that different people bring to the role. It allows you to pay appropriately for the performance and experience rather than treating all the same. As we all know, we are all not the same. And then there is range overlap. This is where the top of one grade overlaps with the bottom of the next grade. Allowing for some overlap will reduce the increase needed to move an employee from one range and into another. This is also something that is done in nearly all compensation designs, but can vary by how much they overlap. Now, let's look at elements of total compensation. There are many elements to total compensation. Each can be categorized as either intrinsic, the psychological benefit gained from performing meaningful work and doing it well, and extrinsic, or tangible awards given to an employee for accomplishing something. Called extrinsic because it is external to the work itself, and others control over the size of it and if an employee receives the award or not. Intrinsic compensation includes job design and fulfillment, while extrinsic compensation can be both monetary and non-monetary in nature. Let's walk through several of them in more detail to understand how they fit in compensation design and total reward strategy. First, compensation can be both indirect and direct. Protection programs, pay for time not worked, and employee services and perks are examples of indirect compensation. Pay for time at work can include compensating employees for meal breaks and training. Paying for time not worked is typically your paid time off programs. When building out compensation programs, many perks are considered benefits, but others are a form of compensation. While gym membership discounts might be considered a wellness benefit, discount at certain retailers that have agreed to participate in your program would be an indirect compensation. Recognition trophy awards for years of service, or achievement of specific targets that lead to holiday sales incentive trips where no money is provided but rather is something of value instead, are additional examples. And so are the use of company vehicles, company-issued cell phones, and other office equipment for a portable or remote office. Direct compensation can be both fixed, such as your base pay or hourly rate, or differential pay, like shift differentials or geographic differentials, and variable, such as profit sharing, performance incentives, bonuses, or commissions. Let's focus on different types of fixed direct-based compensation adjustments by looking at time-based, performance-based, skill knowledge-based, and differential-based pay. This type of adjustment uses the length of time one has been in the job to determine base compensation. Someone who has been in the role for a longer period of time than someone else, all else being equal, could receive higher pay in recognition for their length of service. This is sometimes called seniority or step increases. While this is easier to administer, budget, and communicate, there is no recognition of actual performance. In the same example above, where someone is in the role longer than someone else, the performance of the longer duration incumbent could be worse. It can be hard to justify paying someone more to do the same job when performance is lower. Next is performance-based pay adjustments. This is typically seen through merit increases with a range of increases available for varying levels of performance. Increases tend to range from 3 to 5%, with top performers typically requiring about 1.5 times more than the average in order to feel valued. While this recognizes performance and can be used to influence behavior, it can be more challenging to budget and requires robust means of measuring performance. It also requires management valuing differences in performance. Management buy-in is critical for this differential to be effective. With skills and/or knowledge-based pay, rather than paying the role, you are paying the person. Each person brings a different skill set and knowledge base to the role. This will adjust the compensation to the specifics the individual brings to that role. While it encourages continuous improvement, employee development, and promotes flexibility in work assignments, individuals can top out when they learn all of their job skills. Additionally, pay rates may conflict with the job market, and if you don't use all of the skills on a regular basis, it is easy to overpay someone. If you have a good job rotation system, it really works. Differential base pay adjustments can range from overtime to geographical. They provide incentives to encourage employees to work when and where the company needs them most, even in the least desirable situations. One form we have all become too familiar with during this pandemic is hazard pay. Regardless of the type of differential that you decide to use, make sure that you reflect each different differential as a separate line item on an employee's paycheck. It makes tracking and adjusting the pay differentials far easier. Employees will appreciate the transparency and better understand why their compensation may change with different shifts or jobs they are tasked with performing. Now, let's address variable compensation adjustments by looking at incentive pay and specialized types or groups. Incentive pay, a form of direct compensation, typically takes the form of individual or group incentives. Incentive pay can be either short or long term. Cash is typically used for short term, and cash or stock is used for long term. Individual incentives reward individual employees for going above and beyond in their personal performance. The most common form of individual incentive pay programs that many may be familiar with are management by objectives, or MBO programs, where the set of key performance indicators, or KPIs, are determined and attainment of each KPI leads to some percentage of the total potential incentive pay. The more KPIs you attain, the more incentive pay you make. Group or organization-wide incentives reward for attainment of group goals, teamwork, and/or collaboration, regardless of individual performance. Such group awards might be a calculated incentive pool distributed to a group of employees for their team effort, or a profit-sharing program based on overall organizational performance. It is typical for some specialized groups to have their own direct compensation programs. Two of the most common are executives and direct sales. While executive compensation design is part of overall compensation design, this is a very specialized group that requires a more advanced discussion than we are prepared to go into for this presentation. Direct sales personnel, national account managers, regional account managers, key account managers, and similar types of roles, tend to have a wide variety of variable incentive pay designs that are intended to incentivize attainment of sales or even EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, type goals. How you design this group's incentive pay will depend on your corporate culture and organization's strategic plan. For example, some businesses are in the position where the taking of market share is of paramount importance. Such organizations may focus more on top-line sales in the short term and not be as concerned with bottom-line profitability. At some point, that may change, and so too will the incentive pay. Other businesses may be in more mature markets and be heavily focused on profitability. In these cases, incentives are targeted not so much on the volume of sales, though that will always be important, but more on the profitability of each sales transaction. As your strategic plan and corporate culture evolve over time, so too will your direct compensation incentive plans. There are several other important pay considerations too. Let's briefly touch on several of the most important. What happens when, after you establish your pay ranges or update your pay ranges, and you find that there are some incumbents who are below or above the compensation ranges? There are several ways to address this, including freezing pay until the range catches up for those over the minimum, to bringing up compensation for all below the minimum all at one time. Clearly, there are choices in between. Where we used to see companies bringing employees below the minimum all up in one fell swoop, today we see more of a stair-step approach, such as awarding merit and then bringing up the pay to the minimum if the merit increase does not get them there. Larger differences may stair-step over a year or more. One caution: ignoring the problem or not taking action is detrimental to the employee engagement, performance, and retention at the very least. And these are really big rocks in and of themselves. But they pale compared to the worst case situation. At the worst, failing to correct compensation outside the ranges could lead to legal actions for discrimination. The fees, fines, and government-imposed penalties if an employee or former employee wins a discrimination suit could cost millions of dollars and have significant reputation damage that makes obtaining and retaining talent even more challenging, let alone potential loss of sales. Job changes also require consideration. Whether the change is a promotion or demotion, whether it is voluntary or involuntary, these changes can move employees in and out of different compensation ranges depending on where their compensation lies prior to the job change. Promotions do not necessarily require a vertical change in title, but rather could be a change in the nature of work. It is important to establish guidelines and to keep current pay of current incumbents in mind when promoting someone. Remember the caution about pay parity mentioned earlier in the presentation? Again, while pay parity does not impact compensation design, it does impact decisions on individual compensation. And promotions are one area where awareness of pay parity is very important. Demotions happen, and sometimes even voluntary demotions. Someone may be very valuable person to the company, but decide to take a step back from managerial duties into a different role within the organization. Whether voluntary or involuntary, what is more frequently happening is such decisions come with a cut in pay. How your organization handles such situations will be important, as they can have legal consequences as well as impact compensation range design and budgets. Pay compression, briefly mentioned earlier, is the situation in which an organization has differences in pay between people who have similar skill sets and/or experience levels. This poses problems that can lead to turnover, employee engagement, performance, and recruitment challenges. It is most glaringly seen in some organizations when comparing the salaries and compensation levels between non-exempt employees with overtime and their supervisors. Not very many companies use general increases anymore. Most have moved to performance-based increases. Sometimes in a union environment, there are provisions for increases under certain conditions. If you have a union in your business, the union contract may have stipulations that address general wage increases, and you should use that as a key guide before engaging in such increases. We have looked at many factors related to compensation design. We have walked through how to build internal equity through analysis of jobs and development of job descriptions, external equity through the comparison of essential duties and qualifications to job market data, and elements of compensation design from development of pay ranges to the many types of pay adjustments that can occur. But there is one extremely critical factor to consider when completing the compensation design that has the largest impact on profitability and alignment to the organizational strategic objectives. The budget. It is important to consider all aspects of pay, so you budget accordingly. Compensation design should not be performed in the tight constraint of a current year's budget, but neither should compensation design ignore the need for the business to be profitable. Compensation design and adjustments to the design should inform budget development decisions for the coming year, regardless of when executive management agrees to implement the design changes. People are a business's most important asset. Caring for people through fair and competitive compensation is critical to the long-term success of all businesses. In the budget, you want to leave room to account for these items. You could have a separate line item entry for each or lump them all together. Whichever way you choose to do it, all of these items should be considered when budgeting for you, or you will run out of money. Merit. When deciding your merit budget, you should consider all of the following and not just have your budget the same as the average market budget. Affordability of the company, benefit improvements that are made, technology improvements that are made, training that is provided, and more dollars for top performers. Your merit budget also should reflect how the organization compares overall to your compensation philosophy. Equity. Increases due to changes in the external marketplace and how frequently you have had to adjust compensation will determine how large or small this adjustment will be. Some roles will have higher volatility in the labor market than others. Promotional and career development. Not everyone will qualify for a promotion, nor will everyone engage in elements of career development that would warrant comp adjustments. However, encouraging continued education and professional development, either through internal or external learning and development initiatives, are critical to the continued growth of your company, so likely there will be some budget needed for promotions every year. Bonuses. Wide variety of options to the budget here, and there is no reason you cannot adjust to a different method each year. Evaluation of risks and threats to your business can help inform decisions around how to budget best year to year for bonuses. The catch-all category of other. This is a good catch-all category that should accommodate many different and unusual adjustments, from sign-on bonuses to various differentials that your company may offer. As a final note, what would human resources discussions be if we didn't mention regulatory compliance, right? Compensation design and administration requires compliance with many different laws, but it is never just about the laws themselves. It is about how the laws are being interpreted year to year. Such interpretations carry subtle nuances that require adjustments from time to time and even from one government administration to another. As with most disciplines in human resources, it is critical to have a competent professional who monitors the legal landscape and collaborates with peers, organizational leadership, and with internal or external counsel to ensure current compensation design and practices comply with existing laws and court interpretations. Be proactive, researching pending changes due to new legislation or litigation, and be ready for necessary design changes that will help keep your business in compliance. While understanding these laws are so important, we could, and probably should, spend another 2 hours or more covering them, but that will have to be a topic for another day. Be sure you do take note of these laws. If you are not familiar with some or all of them, it is highly recommended that you become familiar with them, as they will impact both design and administration of your compensation strategy. To sum up, here are some very important reminders, do's and don'ts, for compensation development. Evaluating the efficiency and effectiveness of your compensation programs is critical. Things change, and you need to be certain that the program is appropriate for your company at any given time. If it is not, it is time for a change. Look at if the pay program meets the objectives established by management. Evaluate if the program is being administered according to standard employer policies and procedures. And always be sure your compensation plan can withstand the risk of challenge from employees, government agencies, and other third parties. Line managers and human resources should both understand their role in the administration of the plan. And remember the importance of continuously evaluating the program for future enhancements. While we did not spend time discussing the importance and need to clearly communicate compensation, it cannot be stressed enough the need to do this organization-wide. Certainly, communicating compensation does not mean advertising the base pay of individuals across company, but it does include sharing that compensation is researched regularly and updated accordingly. It does mean speaking with confidence about the competitive pay and overall design of the compensation structure. Where there may be some lag to the market, ensure there is understanding of the total rewards offered, how benefits and other perks make up for compensation in some ways in order to provide a total package that supports your employees and their career and life goals. Be sure to use all mediums to communicate, targeting communications to various demographics when possible, and highlighting what each generational group finds important. Create clear, easy to understand incentive compensation plan documents, and train managers in how to have compensation discussions with employees. And always obtain senior management buy-in on what your communication philosophy will be around compensation. It has been a pleasure talking with you today and sharing some basic information around compensation design. Hopefully you'll find value and many excellent takeaways to improve your compensation programs in your companies. Thank you very much.